essentially our attempt to revitalize the UN during its 75th anniversary and provide opportunities for youth to get involved with various decision-making processes at the international level. So as we're gathered here, we have some good speakers, or at least so it should be a good event. And I also encourage you to check out the IAPSS website, IAPSS.org, IAPSS.org, to check out how you can get involved with our organization, as we're a democratic student government representing political science students around the world. And we have lots of other fun, events and informative activities like this coming up, and also, various previous things I recorded on our YouTube channel as well. So thank you very much, and I'll hand it back to Marcos.
Thank you very much, Justin. In order to get to know our speaker a little bit, his name is Jonathan Cummings. He's originally from Kingston, Jamaica, so it's a speaker from our region. At the age of 16, he moved to New York and graduated from Ithaca College with a bachelor degree in Culture and Communication Studies, and got his master in Public Administration from Cornell University. He has a significant personal experience working with political campaign, international NGOs, and operating within the United Nations space. He served as a diplomatic engagement associate with the Global Peace Foundation, and while at GPS, he worked on planning development at the International Youth Leaders Assembly, the IYLA, and the YLA is a partnership-driven initiative that brings thousands of young people to attend global summits at the World Bank and the United Nations. And during the IYLA 2017, Jonathan spoke at the United Nations General Assembly. Currently, he serves as a member of the Steering for Alliance of NGOs and the CSO for South Cooperation, which is a committee that works with the United Nations Office for South Cooperation. And he also serves as Vice President of the Americas for Global Policy Insights, which is a think tank operating in India, the United Kingdom, and the United States. So very impressive resume, Jonathan. First, thank you very much for joining us today. How are you?
Well, thank you for that introduction. Now hearing it all, it's I guess my background experience, yes, it's long and everything, but at the same time, I have to admit that the only reason I was able to get my start is because of mentorship and people who were willing to give young people like myself a chance to get involved with those spaces. So thank you for having me. I really do appreciate being here. So.
No, thank you for accepting the invitation. So first, I would like to encourage everyone here in the chat and the Facebook live chat that this will be a conversation for all of us. So even while Jonathan's speaking or he's answering one of my questions, you have a question, please, you can submit it, and in the meantime we will be answering in the order of arrival. So the first thing I would like for you to be as long as you can in this answer is, why do you think young people should get involved in the fight against climate change? Not how, not maybe in which way, but why should we join the fight against climate change?
Well, the answer is pretty simple. It's just to echo something that you said in your introduction, where you said youth is not the future, but we're the present. And I firmly agree with that, because as the generation of now, the present, it's our responsibility to do our best to fix the world. Right now, the world there's always going to be issues happening in the world. There's always going to be climate change issues, population things. But as we expand, as our population expands, and as the fight for resources continue, I believe it's up to our generation to try and find ways and active solutions to address these. And a simple reason is because why not? We need to take care and try and fix our planet. Because as the generation of now, as the leaders of today, as the people who want to set the groundwork for the generations of the future, our children and our children's children, I think it's up to us to address issues of climate change and really, really do address an issue of climate change, because climate change is a multifaceted issue which impacts the global economy, beyond, hurricanes and all these things, the global economy. It impacts the energy sector. It impacts population and resources. So, if we don't address that issue right now, or work on addressing that issue right now, then that's going to suffer. The future generations are going to suffer in the long run.
I like that you mentioned that if we do not address this situation right now, future generations will suffer. So I like that you're making this link between our participation, our involvement in climate change, and the question of responsibility, the question of we may have to join not only because we may have to get involved not only because we're able to, but because we have to. We have to get more involved. So which experience directly related to this have you experienced either in the UN General Assembly or working with international NGOs that you may say, listen, common youth, maybe in college, maybe in high school, need to know they can help. They can help doing this. Or they can help us giving more support, maybe a bigger platform.
Yeah. So to your point where it is our responsibility, I completely agree. Yes, it's our responsibility to try and address this issue. To my experience within, the UN space, serving on a UN committee and being really involved with the international arena. Yes, a lot of it's shiny, if I'll admit. A lot of it is shiny, and I get to meet a whole bunch of interesting people. And there's always this talk about trying to get more young people involved, or the youth should have a greater role within the UN space. And I agree, yes, everyone can agree on that. But how do we plug in young people, right? How do we get young people exposed in these spaces, exposed in the international arena? So that project that I was a part of, the International Young Leaders Assembly, the purpose of the program was to expose young people into these international spaces. And just by exposing people into these international spaces, it inspires them and gets them to actually care about an issue. So why would you care about an arena if you're not exposed to it, or a space if you're not exposed to it? Honestly, the reason why I'm involved in international affairs is because I went to that event in 2015 for the very first time, and I actually got exposed in the international arena, and I wanted to keep up the work. Now, that's just one example, even from me and a bunch of people here who are interested or involved in international affairs. But not everyone has the access to, say, the UN space, or living in New York or in Europe or Geneva or whatever. And you can, to address the climate change and issues that impact our generation and people, or the larger landscape of the world, there are a whole bunch of different arenas to get involved. You can get involved on a grassroots or local level. Civil society organizations, nonprofits, and NGOs, their purpose is to, hopefully, most of their purpose is to try and make an impact, a positive change, whether it's addressing climate change or women and gender equality issues, or various issues, or various negative issues. Getting involved with government and decision making, honestly, I think the most effective way for anyone to make change is to get involved with politics or decision making, because
usually when we talk about youth involvement in the fight against climate change, and it's the way I think about it, we have three possible scenarios. We have a political scenario when you join the decision making bodies, when you try to influence your politician, your legal representative, your representative. You have the academia, when you join a science career, maybe you join your university and try to get the science out there. And last, you have the civil society, when you join, as you said, a grassroots movement, an NGO. No, it doesn't have to be Greenpeace. You can join a small NGO trying to make a change in your community. I remember, and this is, I promise this story is related to a question, to upcoming question. I remember when I was in high school, we had this huge problem with water supply coming from a developing world. We have this huge problem with water supply and waste management. And we contact City Hall, and we contact other institutions. And I remember it was the parents of the school that worked with this, created this work table, this decision table, and they solved the issue. So, and this is my question: how do you think that from this region, from Latin America, you coming from the Caribbean, how do you think that from this region, Latin America and the Caribbean, can we get more young people involved in the fight against climate change?
Well, so with getting young people from Latin America and the Caribbean more involved, first off, there needs to be an understanding from when young people are in school that climate change is an issue. Because if I'm being completely honest, so I went to school in Jamaica. I lived in Jamaica up until 16, and came to the States. And my father's in Jamaica, and go back every so often. But when I was in school in Jamaica, we had environmental science courses, but we never really talked about climate change. That's something I'll admit. We never really talked about climate change or the impact of climate change or the long-term repercussions of it. And I believe that if on an academic level, because with getting young people involved in anything, sometimes it just takes education or being aware of an issue. I think schools in the Caribbean and Latin America need to make sure that that's a part of the curriculum.
Increase education and awareness material.
Yes, education awareness. And when there's an education awareness is embedded in a child's future, there's always going to be children who feel like they can fix everything, blind optimists. I'm one of them, right? You have people who feel like they can fix everything. So you have a lot of people who want to be in leadership positions. And if there's an issue that's there, they feel like they could address it. They just need to be aware of the issue and want to make an active step in addressing such an issue.
Yeah, I believe someone has a question. If someone has a question, you can either raise your hand or ask it directly to the chat. And
I wanted to ask, like,
I believe no one.
In what ways have like Caribbean
could you
youth
please
been
state
affected by climate change?
your name first, and the country you're joining us from? Okay, where are you joining us from?
Hello?
So where you're joining us from? Yeah.
Oh, California.
Say your name and the country. From California. You can ask your question.
In what ways have Caribbean youth been affected by climate change?
Yes, you can ask your question.
Yeah. Okay, so Caribbean youth, well, hurricanes. So growing up, I personally have experienced 6 hurricanes in my life. So hurricanes is a massive issue within the Caribbean itself. The Caribbean is a region that it cannot escape the impacts of climate change. And as climate change gets worse and worse, the polar ice caps melts and hurricanes become more frequent and stronger, the Caribbean, it's almost impossible to escape. Because, in Puerto Rico, there was a Hurricane Maria that devastated Puerto Rico. And I believe it was last year, there was another hurricane that hit the Bahamas. And I can talk about my personal experience where I've, in Jamaica, where we got directly hit by a Category 5 hurricane and light was out for a month. The streets were flooded. So, that's like just one direct example of how climate change directly impacts the Caribbean. But there are an array of other things, but that's the main thing that the Caribbean focuses on in regard to climate change.
Yeah, I mean, Ben, if I can add to your answer, coming from insular countries like the Dominican Republic, Jamaica, we know firsthand how the climate change can impact all of us. Because I mean, we have a stronger than ever hurricane seasons. We have stronger than ever storms that are outside the hurricane season. So it's really tough to not to talk about climate change and not get personally involved. Yeah, personally involved. Anyone has another question, you can also write it down in the chat if you don't wish to speak, and I can read it for you. No, so I guess we can proceed. So I like that you mentioned about having this environmental courses about growing up. We also have those here in the DR, and I know a lot of people from Latin America can can identify as well. But you talk about increased education and awareness about climate change, not just the environment. And technically, climate change is not as a new topic or as a new name as we think it is. Climate change has been here for a while, but we've just been waiting, hearing about it. And I believe this because of the increase of our presence on social media. So when you talk about increasing education and awareness, do you mean on a formal level, like coming from the government, from the political system, and from academia?
So I think from a formal level, it needs to happen because this is where you need young people in decision-making positions within in the Caribbean and Latin America, because we are, I believe that we're more aware of the present issues that affect our generation and future generations beyond climate change, things like technology and the fact that we're going through, or the world's going through, a fourth industrial revolution and things like that. People who've been in government and decision making sometimes they aren't fully aware of those issues, or their minds are so preoccupied with things and issues of the past that sometimes they don't look at things of the future. But circling back, so I believe that it needs to come from a formal level. So in academia, maybe government, if you have a civil society organization, nonprofit, advocating that this should be a current part of the curriculum, I think it'd be very beneficial. And the way to approach it, the way I believe to approach it, is that you can talk about climate change, as I mentioned, as it is a multifaceted issue. Yes, you have hurricanes and floods and things like that, but it also impacts agriculture, right? The Caribbean and Latin America, their economies depend on agriculture and tourism. People know Jamaica for being a tourist destination. Climate
The
change,
Dominican
definitely.
Republic, yeah, in the Dominican Republic as
In
well.
Dominican Republic, I heard that the Dominican Republic, if all the lands were used appropriately for agriculture, it could feed the entire Latin America and the Caribbean. That's someone did an assessment on that a while back, and I was like, wow, really? It's interesting. But like all these issues, tourism, agriculture, it's impacted by climate change, and so you can link it to the economy. And if you make the case, because countries and government decision makers and people of power, sometimes the best way to get their attention is to just talk about money. So if you link it to the economy and make the claim that if you don't address climate change, it will negatively impact the economy, then I feel like you can get them to listen and try to make changes on an institutional level. Because I specifically for the Caribbean, more so than Latin America, climate change is a massive issue. Hurricanes and floods and rising sea levels and everything. It's very big, and we need to address it.
I believe I read that you have worked with the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, and I remember because the other speaker, the one who has worked with them with the drafting of the Paris Accord, the UN agreement of Paris Agreement back in 2016, sorry, and looking at these governments and these institutions within the United Nations that are currently working to address climate change and the environment, the risks facing the environment, I cannot avoid myself from asking, do you think that we as a young people, as a youth, have enough places of influences in institutions as the United Nations, as the Organization of American States, in CELAC, the Community of States of Latin America and the Caribbean? Do you believe there currently are enough places of influence for young people?
No, I don't think so. I know within the UN space, yes, we have the UN Secretary General's Envoy on Youth, which, yes, that's an impressive, that's a good step. You know what I mean? Like you have various youth leaders in positions of power and everything, and that's good. But I feel like there needs to be a larger voice of young people. And I was playing around with this idea with a friend, a good friend of mine. We're talking about this, and I said, I know that there's a Secretary General's Envoy in Youth, and I think the African Union has their youth envoy to the UN, I believe. And then I thought, I'm like, wait, why isn't there like a youth envoy for specific different regions, right? Because various regions have different issues. So like the Caribbean and Latin America, imagine if the Caribbean and Latin America had a youth envoy to the United Nations. You know, their issues are going to be completely different than say the youth envoy from the African Union, or say the one from Asia or Europe, you know, because each region has different issues. But beyond thinking of it from a UN or international multilateralism space, within local and regional governments, local, regional, national governments in specific countries, I think that there needs to be more of a youth involvement within the decision-making level, as I keep coming back to. And yes, I know from the Jamaica speaking, I can talk about Jamaica. You have two main political parties, and the Jamaica Labour Party and the People's National Party. And the Jamaica Labour Party has like a young JLP branch. It's good that you have like a youth branch working with like the older branch, but why not just have young people in the older system? You know, like what's the harm, right? They're already there. And let's be honest, I mean, the older established system is the one that makes the decisions anyway. So why not have more young people involved, right? So
yeah, definitely. I think Urdava, it's our IAPSS Asia chair. She has a question. Say, why are we still struggling with this though?
People like to hold on to power. You know, people like to hold on to power.
That's a more political question. Like, how not only how do we get more young people involved in climate change, but how do we get more people involved in all aspects of political power? How do we get more people in the decision-making process?
Yeah, you know, it just comes down to power dynamics. People like to hold on to power. Let's talk about the United States and the US election, right? Like, you have two people in their 70s who are going to be president of the United States, you know? They have Donald Trump and you have Joe Biden. They're both in their 70s. And in the Democratic primary, you had Bernie Sanders. It was between Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. I mean, Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. Then they're in their 70s. And yes, Bernie Sanders' political ideology aligned more with young people, sure. But at the same time, I mean, he's a man in his 70s. And it's just like a thing that happens all over the world. In Nigeria, at one point, I think up until 2 years ago, they had a minister of youth who was in his 40s or 50s. What is that? Like, what? Why a minister of youth from Nigeria?
I believe Tabenkio2 has a question. Please say your full name and from which country are you joining us? We can hear you.
Yes, I'm from here. Don't worry, I'm not very far from you. Well, my name is Tavenki Klerman. In fact, I was paying attention first before I could try to say something. And indeed, the conversation is very important. But I'm a little bit skeptical about something. It's not just because I'm not agreeing on the fact that youth should get involved more and more in decision making and different platform, just like our partner just said it, maybe political, maybe academic, or even the civil society. But the major question that I have is climate change is not just a natural phenomenon. It is something produced by action of those important actors in the world. Now, isn't it more of a problem of legislation, like legal? Like we don't know who is responsible of what is happening to the world. And we don't know who's gonna have to pay for those damages. We don't know who hold the responsibility. Now, I'm wondering if the solution, or maybe the route to the solution, is not founding itself in the international law and the public international law, where we can precisely and clearly draw the lines, the right and responsibilities, and those the major, those producers of all those things that are breaking our world into nine pieces, then they can invest more into the reconstitution of our ecosystem. And one important philosopher and contemporary politician He's a French. I'm referring to Jean-Luc Mélenchon. He has a very simple theory. The theory is that we do not take to the world more than the world can restore in a reasonable time. I believe that should be it.
Okay, so so you brought up a whole bunch of interesting points, specifically about international law and the main contributors of climate change dealing with it. So right now, the two main contributors are China and the United States, right? China and the United States. And creating an international law, say you prosecute China and the United States to do things about climate change, I feel like even if you create a law, what's going to make them follow it, right? If we're being completely honest and frank about it, why would the United States or China follow an international law when the United States is the main contributor to the United Nations and China is about to become the world's largest economy in 2030, right? Why? You know, that's the thing is, it's like money talks. Yes, I understand money talks when it comes to international law and politics and sometimes making direct change. Money talks, regardless if we want to admit it or not. It does. With the climate change thing, I guess with the Paris Agreement, when that came about, I was speaking to someone, a friend of mine who's conservative, and he was telling me that he supports pulling out the Paris Agreement. And I said, why? And he said, oh, because the U.S. is given the most money to fix address climate change. And I said, so we should pull out of you're supporting us pulling out the Paris Agreement because the U.S. is the largest contributor of it. He's like, yeah, I mean, why should we care about fixing climate change? It's like everyone in the world contributes to it. But I said, well, the U.S. is, well, now China is the largest contributor, but the U.S. is the second largest contributor, right, to climate change. So wouldn't it be fair if we gave the most money? And he said, no. So you see, there's that thinking that prevails. Like, how do you convince the United States or China and India, which is the second largest population, and they're going to become a mass polluter very, very soon, or if they are not right now. How do you convince these countries to actually address climate change? And the best way I keep thinking about it in my mind is, we need to get more forward-thinking people in decision-making positions of power and whatnot. But also we need to talk about a way in which climate change or addressing climate change is profitable. Like, why should a business care about using sustainable practices, right? Why should they think about impact investment? Why should the Caribbean, these countries, care, talk, or teach climate change issues, right? You got to sometimes relate it to money. You have to relate it to the economy. You have to tell them that, hey, if you don't address climate change, and tourism is dead. Another pandemic is going to happen at some point. But like if you don't address climate change, and more viruses and these things are going to pop up. So we just have to we have to link climate change and making a positive green economy and link it to the global economy and money. Yes, to profits.
Oh, Jonathan, I have two questions for you. First, you raised the question about I think this is more about nationalism and national strategy, national agenda. And if the pandemic has proven something, is that countries led by young people and women are the most successful on beating the pandemic. And so the first question is, do you think that it may be a direct consequence of addressing climate change, but we need more young people on public office? You need more people running for office and taking the decisions. And same goes a question that Rodi mentioned is doing in the chat. She's asking, what are your thoughts on the global Green New Deal? Like a Green New Deal, but a global level.
A global Green New Deal. Which one should I address first? I keep saying more young people need to be in office, more forward-thinking people need to be in decision-making powers, because if we're going to move the world forward, the world and life is all about progression. No matter how much you want to look towards the past and reminisce about the past, I mean, the past is the past. Let's stay in the past, right? We're going to always progress. New technologies are going to arrive. the fact that we have a touchscreen phone right now is a simple thing. You know, China 30 years from 30 years in the past, I think it was 30 years ago, everyone was on bikes, and now look at them. You know, they're second largest economy. So you have to be forward thinking and make decisions that are beneficial for the future generations and for your country's future. With the global Green New Deal, you know, I'm in support of more green initiatives, a green economy, more people addressing climate change, and a global legislative thing. But I guess a couple of questions would be, how do we enforce a global Green New Deal? You know, would it come from the UN level? Would you go to the Netherlands and, you know, the International Criminal Court, I don't know, say that it's a law or something? And if we have a global Green New Deal and have a couple policies and legislations in place, how do we enforce it? Do you want to allow the US and China, the two largest economies, to dictate what other countries should do? You know what I mean? So there are a whole bunch of gray areas, but I do agree with the concept of the idea of global policies or to address, to encourage a more green economy and address climate change and, you know, lessen carbon emissions and things like that.
Yeah, but this inevitably talking about the Green New Deal. So anyone who like to expand of the global Green New Deal conversation, we already just share a link to a really helpful page on unenvironment.org. So after this, you can click on it, or you can click and save the page. You can expand if you wish. But talking about the global Green New Deal, does not this take us back to the conversation of the national agenda? Because it's not total craziness to a country saying the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, China, India have polluted for decades, and I'm underdeveloped. Why do I not have the right to pollute in order to achieve the development stage, developed stage?
Mm-hmm. So with how do I address this? So it's almost like with China's rapid development, look at China as a case study for this. So China's rapid development, they rapidly went through mass urbanization and almost like their version of industrial revolution very quickly, and they developed a whole bunch of, you know, mega cities, and they have like first tier, second tier, third tier cities, introduced a lot of cars and whatnot. And with that, yes, it created a lot of pollution, in which led them to be the largest, you know, polluter right now. That's a tricky question, a tricky gray area, because yes, I hear where you're coming from, and I see that, you know, with mass industrialization, yes, it could rapidly propel an economy, develop an economy forward. But at the same time, I think what we need to, right now, we have the technology to promote green initiatives, sustainable infrastructure, good technology that can help developing countries. So what I think we need to do is that there needs to be a model that can be like, okay, so in the Industrial Revolution, else called the Industrial Revolution, might have happened to a developing country, which propelled it into making a lot of money and rapid growth, right? Is there a more sustainable model that we can come up with that utilizes green technology, electric cars, you know, this is an example, you know, green technology, electric cars, more of a sustainable model that we can develop and give this as a template to developing countries. So instead of, you know, burning a whole bunch of coal for power or chopping down trees and everything, you know, there's a sustainable model where, okay, sure, you cut down a tree, but make sure you plant this many trees to replace the amount of trees you cut down. Or if you rapidly urbanize a city and you have a whole bunch of pollution, there's this more sustainable way to do that. So when you have a city, a large mega city, like, you know, Nigeria has the largest population in Africa, and I think one of the fastest, the largest youth populations in the world. So I feel like, you know, Lagos is going to be like, it's like about to be like a mega city in Africa. And I feel like with a whole bunch of development, it's just going to expand, right? So the reason why I'm bringing up Lagos, if there was like a more sustainable solution to a sustainable template for a city like Lagos or, you know, Johannesburg or whatever, for them to follow, I think that'd be beneficial to the country's economy and to the country overall and for the world. Because, if a rapidly developing country can use this and prove that this model works, I think people will just follow it. I hope that answers your question.
No, I'm pretty sure that answered the question. But however, I would like to expand on the situation of underdeveloped countries, because this, it's a conversation that we're having. I know we're having it here in the Dominican Republic, and I can put a pretty example. We have this region which beautiful beaches, and just right next to it there's a rainforest, and everyone's talking about the potential of a huge touristic complex. But the thing is, the entire region, it's inside a national park. So are people raising the question why? And this region is one of the poorest of the country. So people raising the question why this region should be the poorest of the country when they have this potential. Shouldn't we just reduce the size of a national park and maybe develop this huge touristic complex? And there's a pretty interesting movement, because it's young people from this region that's fighting against the predatory development, that it's fighting against developing this region and maybe having destroyed this national park. So how do you reconcile this when you have these two doctrines, when you have young people who are fighting for more development, who are fighting for more international, for more economic growth, but at the same time you have young people as well fighting for more protection of the environment and fight against climate change? So how can we get both sides on the table, on the policy making table, and reach an agreement?
Oh, that's $1 million question. And if I had the answer to that, I'd be a multimillionaire. But but before I try to answer that, which region of the Dominican Republic is that? Is that La Samana or?
No, the South region. The South region.
Okay.
Oh, he knows very well the Dominican Republic.
Yeah, I love it. So to that question, that's a multi-million-dollar question, because that's a perfect example of local strife and ideas clashing on their versions of what they think will help the most people. One group believes that economic development, developing that region and building tourism and rapid economic development will create jobs and help people, which it has its merits, right? The other group says that no, we need to protect the natural integrity of the country and the land, and look in the long run, because climate change is an issue. We want to protect the ecosystem and everything, and that's another valid point. So it's very tricky, and it really depends on, if I'm being honest, it really depends on how many people with whatever frame of thought is in power, if I'm being completely pragmatic and blunt about it. So if there are more people who believe in economic development for that region and they're in a decision-making level, it's going to happen. But if there are more people who believe in protecting the ecosystem and they're empowered, then the area is going to be protected. Right? So it really depends about the amount of people on each side who is in power. But I don't know the complete issue, but I'm assuming that there have been attempts made to have a group dialogue from both sides, right? Leaders from both sides of us, right?
Yeah. But my question wasn't directly at the specific situation, but I meant
okay.
How young people,
I have an opinion.
Just allow me one moment, Tavenki. How young people can have this conversation, how we can have this healthy debate of economic development and economic growth in a sustainable future, how we can correlate this.
Oh, how I can correlate it? Well, it's like you have to find a middle ground. Like ecotourism is a big thing it's a developing industry, right? Where you look at the natural integrity of a country and you find a way to make it attractive to tourists coming in without destroying or ruining the integrity of the country. I know Colombia, certain parts of Colombia, they've, ever since the FARC peace agreement, I know they've been trying to make certain rainforests in certain areas and turn into an eco-tourist destination. And yet still have minor developments of like a hotel and stuff in the rainforest and whatnot. But they want to protect the integrity of the natural rainforest and things in that area. So if I were to come up with a middle ground which will benefit both parties, that's what I would say. But each issue, it really depends on who's in power and what frame of thinking prevails, or which side has more people in power and who can make decisions in that context.
Yes, I feel like Tavenki had another question or opinion. We can hear you. We can hear
Sorry, I'm sorry. More of an opinion than a question. It's according to what I don't know the name, and I'm sorry, I just forgot it.
No.
Okay, our partner just said, but I just wanted to add something on it. It's like, how do we come about having the United States and China feel a little bit more responsible about what is happening in concerning climate change? Now, I'm asking the same question. How is it so easy for everybody to get together and say, hey, you know what? We don't want Kim Jong-un to have the nuclear weapon. And all of a sudden, sanctions come around and they gotta have a deal. And this is happening. We can take it back to 2008 after the war opposing Georgia and Russia, and all of a sudden Europe, tons of sanctions on Russia. 2014 for Crimea, the same thing. Then if this can happen in other areas of interest, like global interest, why climate change, which is even a bigger interest for everybody, they cannot just come together and get along into, okay, you know what? Because as you referred to the Paris summit happened last year, 2019, 2018, I don't remember. This was the sole purpose of this one, is to gather the biggest fund ever to support those countries that are in region where they are more exposed to any natural disaster, like the Caribbean, like our brother mentioned, the Caribbean and the Latin American countries, and as well the African countries. Now, I wanted to also mention one thing: is it's uh, looking for the solutions. Us as the youth, we are the one creating the demands. So I think in changing our behavior, our customs, our habits, we can also influence the decision makers into how they are going to run the machines. For example, I'm giving you one important information. Let's say, for example, Germany, every year, Germany is throwing to the trash 11 million tons of food products, which they don't use. And I'm referring to just Germany. We're not talking about all those rich countries where they are sending food to the trash. I mean, we untold number. While we still having 2 million of people around the world dying because they do not have food. Now the question is, why do we have to run the machines so much to produce so much? And at the end of the day, what we do with it is just throw it to the trash. And like I've said earlier, we are taking too much from nature, then nature will restore in a reasonable time. Then this is the DNA of this problem that we're trying to understand and see what is the position of the youth and how they can influence, not just influence, take action into taking the first step towards the change.
Okay.
Jonathan, I guess Tavenki just made $1 million questions. I think, or $1 million comments. And I would like to further, before your comment, emphasize in something that he says. I just run quickly to the World Health Organization page, and they said that 150,000 people die annually from diseases related directly or indirectly related to climate change. So I believe in the first part of what Tavenki said, and I would like your opinion on this. why can't we get governments excited enough about climate change as nuclear weapons?
It depends on the priorities of the government. The Trump administration, like was reading this, I'm currently reading this book about Trump administration. There is a priority at that time in Kim Jong-un was to try and make some deal and deter nuclear weapons, right? His priority has been addressing climate change. That's not one of his priorities. China, on the other hand, when it comes to the energy market, they're trying to monopolize the solar panel market. So I think we're the largest producers of solar panels. I believe they are. I mean, there was a news article that came out where China made an island that looked shaped like a panda, or like had a big area that was shaped like a panda out of solar panels, you know? So the way China is addressing it, they're looking at the solar panel industry as one, you know, it's tied to making a whole bunch of money in the economy. So they tapped into the green economy, and you're like using this as a way to make money. Sure. But within the Trump administration, or within the current government administration, climate change isn't really an issue. A matter of fact, he's deregulated a whole bunch of industries and loosened regulations on things which aren't good for the environment. So it really depends on the priorities of the government, or once again, the people in power, the decision makers, right? So, so that's one way to answer the question. So the other point of your question about why young people keep using these machineries or using these things which aren't beneficial to the environment, I think it also comes down to education, right? Because some people in general don't know how to recycle, for example. So I lived in Ithaca for 7 years, Ithaca, upstate New York. And Ithaca is a very green area. It's very ridiculously progressive. People vote for the Green Party up there. You know, it's very progressive. And they promote things like recycling and compost. You know, I lived in New York City. I didn't know that compost was really that big of a thing until I went up to Ithaca. So people compost all the time, and they have areas where people can compost. Some people have compost things in their backyard where they can, you know, use it as fertilizer for their plants and whatnot. So it really comes down to education and a behavioral change and a behavioral change and a shift in mindset. And one way to go about that, as I brought up earlier, would be to have like a formalized education about climate change, or have it as a part of like an educational curriculum. Because think of it from like a developing country perspective, like a Caribbean. Jamaica, I'm just going to use the example as Jamaica. So Jamaica, at one point, Jamaica is pretty much on the equator, but Jamaica doesn't really think about ways in which the country should impact climate change, or opportunities in which it could use solar as a way to power the entire country. I mean, it's completely on the equator. It has summer all year round, but it doesn't think like that. It's not in their behavioral framework. You know, recycling. I actually don't even think most people from Jamaica recycle, if I'm being honest. You know, it's not in their behavioral framework. You don't think on that level. They don't think about these things or these long-term repercussions. It's not something that they're aware of. So I think, yes, we can sit here and talk about, you know, why the world, you know, doesn't recycle, or you don't care that much about climate change. But we also have to realize that we're in the educated top 10% of the world. Let's just say top 10%. That's being generous, you know. And we are very aware of these issues. We are very aware of the long-term repercussions. But a lot of people in developing countries, where their issue is, you know, I don't have. Where's my next meal going to come from? You know, where's my poor people in these developing countries, or poor people in general? Where's my next meal going to come from? How am I going to pay for my rent or something like that? I'm just using those as an issue. Climate change isn't at the top of their agenda. But one way to rectify that from a young people's perspective is if there's like a formalized education or something where talks about climate change and environmental pollution or a green economy or something like that is a part of their curriculum. Because a green economy, moving forward, I believe the green economy is the future. I mean, the fact that China jumped on it so quickly and dominated the solar panel market is an example. And I know wind energy is becoming very, very popular in Europe. So, and Tesla, the electric powered cars, or Elon Musk, I think he became a centibillionaire, which is like he has over $100 billion or something like that. He just made a whole bunch of money off electric cars, and Tesla became the most profitable car company just recently. So I see a green economy as a future, but a lot of people don't realize that, or they don't think about it. It's not something that they're aware of. So we need to have formalized institutionalized education to talk about progressive things such as climate change and a green economy. Hope I somewhat answered your question.
Yes. So in that note, I would like that to all of us, and I like if you have a question like this one, please send it over the chat or raise your hand and you can ask it directly to Jonathan. And this is a more futuristic question. Do you remember at the beginning we talked about young people getting involved in public office and decision making in academia and civil society? And you who has had some experience in public office and in decision making and civil society and maybe in academia, how do you see, like, the region, talking about Latin America, how do you see a way forward to Latin America and the Caribbean, the English speaking Caribbean, the French speaking Caribbean, to get more involved in climate change through these channels, to civil society, to academia, and to public service? And when you're done, Rosanna Alvarez has another question.
Okay. Oh, well, I feel like I'll just be echoing myself and saying nonprofits and formalized thinking, formalized education to talk about it and getting into decision level. But let me bring up this interesting point here. I think that there should be more of an effort from the private sector to do things about climate change. Because I've been talking about the economy and random economic stuff, but I feel like if there were, we don't need a multi-billion-dollar company like Tesla dominating the entire solar panel industry in the Caribbean. We don't need something like that. But imagine if there are small businesses that popped up throughout the region, Caribbean and Latin America, that started to talk about, or started to do things where they tried to get solar panels in, or wind energy, or more sustainable solutions. Not only will that be beneficial for the economy and create jobs and whatnot, but it also be beneficial in the long run, right? And for the money that they generate, you could tie it into, say, a nonprofit or civil society work. So they start generating money and they start working with nonprofits to do educational campaigns, grassroots level educational campaigns on climate change and why you should focus on climate change, or why young people should get more involved, or the long-term benefits. And with these nonprofits, they could do underground cleaning projects, clean the beaches in the Dominican Republic or Jamaica or Puerto Rico, all these little things, which in the long run will be beneficial. And on the academic level, once again, I keep saying institutionalize or have a formalized process of climate change education. So I think that's just a way I'm just trying to connect academic, private sector, and civil society and nonprofits for my train of thought.
Great. I believe Rosanna Alvarez, who's the media coordinator for Latin America and the Caribbean, had a question. Rosanna?
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah,
Can you hear me? Well, hi. I'm sorry to come in late to this meeting. I was, having class at university, and I really think this is the type of conversations that the youth needs to take this time and take the advantage to participate and be heard. And I really saw something in the statements that you were making, and I wanted to address a question concerning the prevention and management of natural disasters in the Latin American region, beginning with situations that like the ones that happened last week. Last week here in the Caribbean and here in the Dominican Republic, we had a tropical storm, and there were a lot of people who actually suffered because of several situations, including the housing deficit that we have here in this region, and also the situation that we don't have enough resilient homes for people. And that is a really interesting question that I have. Like, how can we as a region, I heard that you were mentioning Jamaica, how can we as a region get to have these talks, and that these talks can actually lead to action? Because I feel that here in the Dominican Republic, we talk about climate change when it comes to multilateral diplomacy or regional diplomacy, but then inside the country, you don't see those changes. You don't see those changes when you go to a supermarket or when you buy maybe a water bottle. You know, there is not a system for us, and that worries me a lot because, you know, you can hear this girl, Greta Thunberg, you know, talking about, oh, we need action. And yeah, it's true, we need action, but how can we make that action possible? We have a law in Dominican Republic that actually makes climate education something that is institutionalized. And yet, when I went to a private school, I didn't actually have that opportunity. And that scares me a lot because by 2015, according to UN, there is an estimate that we will have 1 billion climate refugees. And that scares me, you know, a lot. So maybe I want to hear your opinion towards regional diplomacy in Latin America and the Caribbean, towards what it is, this disaster prevention. And to end my statement, I would like to address another question, and this one concerns the UN Security Council. As you might know, I'm from Dominican Republic, as well as John Marcos Peña, which is the chair of IAPSS here. And, you know, Dominican Republic has been in the United Nations Security Council. And on June this year, our country made a joint statement with other countries talking about how climate change should be addressed from a security point of view. And then when it comes, I know maybe I'm talking about some complicated things.
Oh, no.
When it comes to the Security Council reform, will climate change be considered as a security topic? What do you think about this issue? Like, is it really something that the Security Council, take in account its faculties as a council, can address these issues? And well, that is for now my participation, and thank you for being here answering all our questions.
Yeah, not a problem. So you highlighted an array of various issues. So you talked about urban development, infrastructure, and housing as it's related to climate disaster and climate change. You talked about addressing climate change from a security point of view. How do you address climate change from a security point of view? Or rather, should we look at addressing climate change from a security point of view? And I think all of this really comes down to, well, how about this? A security point of view, when you mentioned that, the way I thought about it just instantly was, why should you look at climate change from a security point of view? I'm like, oh, wait, look at climate change from a security point of view because some countries care about security, you know? Some countries care more about specific types of issues, like which was brought up, like what was brought up earlier. Why did the US or everyone get behind sanctioning North Korea when it came to nukes, right? That's like a security thing. You know, how do you reframe a question or reshape a question which will make everyone care, right? One way which I thought about it would be money in the economy, but you know, that's just one facet. From a security point of view, I think actually, from a security point of view, I think that might be legitimate, but that will work for specific countries, specific regions, you know? I think it will work for, say, the United States, Europe, Russia, maybe parts of Asia, because Russia and Germany, they're building an oil pipeline, and would you want Russia to be that much involved with your country when it comes to energy, right? So if you look at it from a security point of view, it's in Western Europe's best interest to promote sustainable and green economies versus going into oil, since they don't want to completely be dependent on Russia. The United States, China is pretty much our adversary right now. China is dominating the solar market, the solar panel market. Who knows? Maybe with these solar panels, China has some like technological hacking thing, which or to take your data. I don't know, right? So if you frame it from a security point of view, certain countries or certain regions will pay more attention and care about it more. What I've been doing, as I mentioned, I've been trying to think of it from an economic point of view, because everyone loves money. The world and the government loves money, and people need money to do some. I mean, yes, corruption happens, but on a localized and country level, money is needed. Yes, I'm ignoring the corruption aspect of that, the money and whatnot. Money is needed to go into necessary projects such as urban development, infrastructure, affordable housing, and a lot of that comes from government funding, right? So when a climate disaster happens, a hurricane, hits a country in the Caribbean or Latin America, and the place is flooded, and sometimes the floods happen and they're there for weeks. That highlights an issue of a lack of housing and proper infrastructure to get rid of or to suffice or fix up the country when the natural disaster ends, or how do you refix the country, right? Or refix the region when a natural disaster and housing is gone. So you need money. And a way a government gets money sometimes, or beyond taxes, it could be from aid, or countries like the United States or China investing in their country or whatever. So it's all this is strangely interconnected, like a security point of view. What I'm trying to highlight here is that all of this is strangely interconnected. At the end of the day, what I think the biggest issue is that you have the countries that have the most money or the strongest military or whatever. They're the ones who are in power, and they get to dictate what other countries should care about sometimes. I know the Dominican Republic was a part of the UN Security Council as a non-permanent member. They're actually the president, I believe, in 2019, I think, or 2018 or 2019, one of those years. He served as a council president. Yes, I remember that, and it was a very interesting time. And yes, they talked about a security point of view, and I think the reason why they talked about looking at climate change from a security point of view was because it might have appealed to the larger countries that are there, the Russia, the China, the United States, the more powerful countries. But now, beyond all of that, beyond the security point of view, the infrastructure, housing, coming up with money, this and that, the next question is, how do you enforce climate policy, right? How do you enforce these institutionalized changes that have happened within a country, or a country wants to formalize education within schools about climate change and a green economy? How do you formalize that? And the only way to formalize it, honestly, once again, everything comes back to the decision makers, who are the people in power, right? And the only way to formalize something on a country level, it comes down to the decision makers and the people who are in power. So, since you're very passionate about climate change and everything, I would, recommend that maybe you try and become one of those decision makers, because the world, actually a country needs forward and progressive thinkers who actually care about long-term issues within their country. And the best way to enforce those rules, or to make sure the rules are being followed, is to be in positions of power. So, yes.
Yeah, I mean, we should all try to get and become policymakers and decision makers. And just as a story, here in the Dominican Republic, the solid waste management law that it's hoped to ban single-use plastic on a 3 years period has been in Congress for the past 2 decades. On July, we just elected the youngest Congress ever and the law just get out of the committee and it's going to be debated on the floor for the first time in 2 decades. Why? Because more young people means more debate about issues affecting us all, affecting the future generations. That's what I believe. If anyone has another question,
I have an opinion.
oh, thank
And
you, of course.
sure. Thank you very much, Jonathan, and thank you very much,
Yep.
John Marcus. And one thing is, as you mentioned so many times, that we are future. Those things are mainly under the responsibility of those decision makers, and us as future decision maker. I just would like to highlight a few things and call our attention to a few things. For example, while you mentioned this growing, the fast growing of this solar market now, that they're trying to change the way that we're producing energy and trying to go to a clean energy instead of that nuclear energy and those from the way that we're producing energy now. There is one big issue with it as well, is the residual. Now the debate is that, okay, we're going to massively produce different means of producing the energy, but afterwards, what do we do with those things? And we know this, one of the problem that is actually affecting most of the region in Africa is because that they're bringing those technological, I could say, residuals, because they used to send them to the sea. It takes too much money to bring them to the space. Now, what are we going to do with those residual in the near future? Us as future decision makers, we need to think it as well. And you also mentioned the compass that many countries are doing, and this is one of the biggest threat to our ecosystem. Why is that? Because that product that we dump into the ground, as time goes on, this is going to dilute, and then it's going to go down to the groundwater. And this is producing a whole lot of problem in other countries already. And researchers already proved that this is getting our waters contaminated. So it's a lot of problem that we have to address. And as our fellow colleague Rosanna mentioned, why would they look at this in a security perspective, as it may produce those effect to the society? It's merely a security issue, because food safety is one of the biggest security issues that the whole world is actually facing. And when a hurricane pass somewhere, or let's say that all those things that the climate change may cause to those countries where we get devastated by those hurricanes, afterwards, the aftermath, we have a humanitarian crisis that stays. So this is why the Security Council will always look at that as a security issue, because those humanitarian issues, they do consider it as security problem. And this is not only concerning the country where this is happening, but the whole world.
Mhm. So let's start off with the residual waste, right? So I guess my first question or first thought would be, how do you get rid of the residual toxic waste that's bad for the groundwater, or bad for the long-term food supply, which you could definitely, it is a security risk, right? Let's say, like,
Of
linked
course
to
it
food,
is.
definitely it's a security risk. But how do you get rid of the residual waste? That's an issue, because there's some places, I think, regarding nuclear energy, I think I remember seeing this a while back, where Canada, I'm just using Canada as an example, they were doing some nuclear, they were test experimenting with nuclear energy, and they had a whole bunch of nuclear waste and nuclear rods, I think, and they dumped it in a remote area within Canada, and that entire environment, the trees and everything, died. Right.
That's exactly
So
what I was trying to mention, and that's
yeah,
100% true.
yeah. So how do you get rid of it? I feel like that's a science question. How do you get rid of nuclear waste? Are you gonna shoot it into outer space? No, you don't want to start. I won't even like toy with that idea. We don't want to start polluting outer space. No. So I feel like that's a question that scientists a question you should ask a scientist, or a scientist should come up with that answer. Like, what's a beneficial or safe way to get rid of nuclear waste instead of burying it or dumping it or, God
I
forbid,
think
throwing it
I
in
think
the sea?
there are many good studies going on. For instance, let's say for example that the world is looking into a fusion for nuclear and producing energy, like they're calling it now the nuclear fusion. The nuclear fusion is going to lead us to not producing our energy, which is the motor of the whole world, especially for all those machine and the industry. Instead of now breaking it, we're going to fuse it. And with one piece of the same matter that is producing the energy now, and then will give us so much residual waste that tomorrow we don't know what to do with. They are going to I really don't have the real terminology for it, but they fusing it and making it lasting over time longer and producing even more. I think this is they are investing a whole lot of money in it, and I think the first plant is in construction in France, and we're looking forward to see what this is going to give us, because what they're really looking for is something reasonably impossible. Because when you're trying to get on Earth, about 15 million um like a space that is so hot 15 million times than the sun, this is mind blowing. But let's say they are the scientists, they're looking to see to do something. Let's see what they come about with.
Yeah, I hope they come up with something that that's beneficial in the long run, because I feel like regardless of how long you're gonna make the nuclear energy last, it's gonna produce waste. Like, even if you double the lifespan of the energy, right, it's gonna produce waste. So what are you gonna do about the waste? Yeah, you can extend the lifespan, triple it, times it by 10, whatever, but at a certain point, waste is gonna come up, and what are you gonna do? So that's a question for a scientist. Well, I didn't do so well in physics, so I can't really answer that. But anyway, so the other point in regards
I either.
in regards to food safety. So food safety, that's definitely a security issue. That's a world, that's a global issue. It's definitely a global issue, but if you look at who it impacts the most, it impacts developing countries the most, right? Food safety impacts developing countries the most. Countries such as the North American region, North America and Europe, they're not really, food safety is a global issue, but they're not as impacted by it compared to Ethiopia. And I believe Ethiopia had a famine, maybe they still are. They were in a famine last year or so. So it impacts developing countries. But if it were to ever, go ahead.
Yeah, I believe Rosanna wanted to add something to the discussion.
Oh, yes.
Rosanna, and after Rosanna, Manuel Santana also.
Sure. I have a question, but I would like you to finish your statement. I think you were talking about something.
Yeah. I feel like if food waste, or not food waste, food safety, if that really started to impact a lot of developed countries, wealthier economies, I feel like it would be a massive issue. Or I feel like it'd be an issue that people pay more attention to. That's what I think, if I'm being completely honest. I saw that last week, or actually this entire last month, there have been some typhoons that hit China. And so there've been a lot of flooding in the eastern region of China. And in the eastern region of China, there are a lot of crops. And so China is about to face a food safety issue. They're about to face a food safety issue because of climate change and the typhoon flooding out the area and all of crops being destroyed. Now, I'm just curious. I'm kind of watching that just for out of my own curiosity. I'm watching that and I want to see how China is going to react. I know they're trying to implement more policies all of a sudden in regards to food safety, like limiting the amount of food people can consume and things like that. But I want to see if that policy is going to, or that stance that China has taken on food safety because of a typhoon, because of climate change, if it's going to have a ripple effect on various countries. So I'm just testing a theory that I want to see. So
I
that's my
excuse
question.
myself. I
Was
will
that
have to disconnect. I have a class that will start. This is very. I really don't feel like. Let me see if they start. If they do, then I will
thank you very
get
much.
disconnected.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Rose, you had a question.
Sure. My question is about. I'm sorry, my dog is getting anxious. My question is about the COVID mask production issue and the plastic waste. This situation is something that is really important and that we need to address. You know, we talk about climate change and solid waste, and when we talk about solid waste, we usually think about plastic, but the thing with the masks is really concerning because every day we keep producing more and still we haven't found an alternative that gets to be a sustainable one, and we actually do need this. And I think this should be a point. I wanted to ask your opinion about this issue, and I wanted to say that in the cases of the countries that have a high percentage of corruption, sometimes laws aren't enough. Sometimes we need real action. You know, we have laws, and having a law doesn't mean things are going to change. Having it legally institutionalized doesn't mean it's going to be like that. And that is a really concerning issue because I think we don't have taken into consideration the situations of our countries. We still don't have a model that we can copy and that can be actually implemented in a good way, so that we can change it and mold it and adapt it to our necessities. So I think that should be a turning point on the UN75 talks about what can we do on our cases, because you know we developed countries didn't have that opportunity that developed countries today have to be or to acquire development. We couldn't exploitate carbon on the industrial revolution to get today to where they are. So what about us? What can we do to get to that development state in where we can guarantee our people, our humans, that they will have a resilient home that can actually guarantee them that if a hurricane comes or if an earthquake happens, like it did happen on Haiti and affected the island, that they will be okay. How can we guarantee our people, not only Dominicans or Haitians, but you know, people that live on this part of the globe, you know, the central one, that we're gonna be fine? How can we work on that? So I think that's the end of my statement. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you for your questions. And you just made me think about something which I never thought about. It's the COVID, the mask plastic issue. I've actually never thought about that. And I feel like I know that not many people have ever thought about that, to be honest. And that's actually an issue. I've never given that any thought before, if I'm being completely honest. Um, because especially, you know, right now during the pandemic, masks have been mass produced. A lot of people have been donating masks or giving away masks and selling masks. I know in the well, not just in the United States. There are people who have made cloth masks and they've been selling or giving away and donating. I guess that's a solution, you know, to lower the amount of plastic that the masks that have plastic in it. That's a solution. But you know, that's a solution that's happening right now. People have been developing masks, more cloth masks, and selling them and whatnot, especially since this pandemic has been dragging on. But what's gonna happen to the masks that have already been made, that have already been there, that are already dumped? That I don't know, because this is honestly, this is the first time that I've heard anyone ever bring up that point, and it's a very, very valid point. It's a very valid point. A friend of mine started this campaign called A Million Masks, and he, started getting a whole bunch of masks and donating them to various hospitals and various hospitals and nonprofits and places. And it's a great initiative and it's helped a lot of people. But now, to your point, what's going to happen to those masks? Are you just going to dump them? That's going to lead to another level of pollution. So, yeah, that's a very interesting point you just brought up, and something that I'm going to have to really think on. To the point of corruption, how do you get them out? There's not a real effective model. Honestly, there isn't an ideal model of governance or anything, and corruption is something that is unfortunately institutionalized in a lot of countries. You can't really point to a country, or there are not many examples of countries that are free of corruption, especially developing countries, Caribbean, Latin America, Africa, throughout Asia. It's a big issue. So even with me living in Jamaica, my father back in Jamaica was a member of parliament. He was a member of parliament and was involved in government, and he actively spoke out against corruption within the country. And he's no longer in that position, but he actively spoke out against it. And now we just had an election this week. The election results came out yesterday. You have the press, the Jamaica Gleaner, and the press, and all these things criticizing how corrupt the government is. How that their funds are coming in, the people in power are just pocketing it, and it's something that has impacted several countries, like many developing countries. How are you going to move forward as a country, as a developing country, if you don't do right by your people, if you don't properly develop infrastructure for the poorest population, if you don't invest money into education and these things, how are you going to move forward, right? So these are all questions that I don't have the answer to, and I wish there was a model that we can look at and be like, oh, here's an ideal model of a country that developing countries can look at and be like, okay, there's no corruption here. Look at how they've advanced. Look at how sustainable their countries. Look at all the infrastructure improvements they have. I mean, yeah, you could use a European model and look at countries like Finland and whatnot. But at the same time, the Western European model for governance, I don't believe will work for the Caribbean or Latin America. Each country has their own different style of governance, and the issue with a lot of developing countries is that, I was about to say we have, sound like my father. I mean, these countries have institutionalized corruption, and that's a big issue. So, I'm sorry if that sounded pretty depressing. So.
No, it's okay. I believe Manuel Santana had another comment.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, everybody. For me, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Marco, for the invitation. I really appreciate it, and thanks, Jonathan, for the wonderful arguments that he been expressing during this meeting. So, more than like questions, I got like opinions, and I want to start saying this: I'm a believer, not in Justin Bieber, but I'm a believer on that education is the key to solve most of the problems that humanity are facing now. And I'm saying this: if you take, for example, Dominican Republic, which I'm from, and you take the the more vulnerable sectors of our country, you can see like their policies about what is what is like climate change and all the stuff. And it's something that really, really affects, because in our countries, and specifically in Latin America and some of the Caribbean countries, we were being relaying all the stuff on the government, and that's not right. You can just expect or let the government do all for you. You gotta take part of what are you doing in your country to get better education education, get better technology, develop more tools in all the aspects. And I'm saying this because you go to whatever location where like more of the people that has been affected by Hurricane Laura past weeks, and you can see how the poor how they're being like taking care of their own community. Like it's true that the government don't provide most of them with like trash services, like pick up the trash and all the stuff, but like it's incredible to see how they made all these trash sites to dump all the trashes, and like that is the biggest part of the problem of all these floaties and all this stuff that has been going on. And that's for me, that's one of the biggest problems in specifically in the Dominican Republic and most of the countries of the Caribbean and Latin America. And what you were saying about the mask of COVID-19, like here in Dominican Republic, like the only policy we got with taking care of climate change is just have the three trash cans, one for paper, the other for plastic, and other for organic stuff. But that is not enough. Like if you think about it, that is not enough. Like you don't do nothing with that. And also you can like with all that, like you can see how people most of the time don't take part on. All right, so I'm watching this, for example, in Germany. These people are taking their trash and doing whatever stuff they're doing, recycling stuff. Like what I can think about it and do something myself to don't waste all of the stuff. And this is other thing that I want to talk about, and it's called REPI. REPI is in Ethiopia. It's like it's a trash mass-produced company. Like they take all the trash and they make three stuff in their company. They recycle all the trash, like they treat it, and they produce, when they burn the trash, they produce energy by turbines. And by the way, with that heat of the burning trash, they heat water, and with the rest of the trash, they make bricks for make homes for poor people. So that is great. That is something that every country in Latin America, and specifically in the Caribbean, taking the example of Punta Catalina, that is one of the more corrupt constructions of all time in the Dominican Republic. That is something that we as the society, we have to take place and take action and make the proposal to the states of take that as an example and make it happen here. That is my statement, and thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Manuel, for your comments. Before you reply, Jonathan, I would like to read Anthony's question. And he says, my question is, why do we talk about enforcement AGW mitigation when we will be talking about incentivizing, leveraging developmental aid in developing and less developed states, using behavioral economics to get more forward momentum, rewarding multinationals for positive contributions? So I would like you to reply to this elaborate comment from Anthony and to Manuel's comments really fast.
Okay, so let's start with the question of incentivizing versus enforcing, more or less, right? That in that context, it pretty much just really depends on the vision of the people, the person in power, the decision maker. So both incentivizing and enforcing they both have effects, impacts and effects. It's like, you know, do you prefer the carrot or the stick? I mean, in some contexts, the carrot will work. In other contexts, the stick might be better. So it really just depends on the person in power and the decision-making capacity, or what their vision is. I believe that both the carrot and the stick has its merits to an extent. You know, some actors, some people, some situations require diplomacy or incentivizing, which sometimes, you know, you could even look at, I mean, you can look at incentivizing, I mean, in a different context, you could look at incentivizing sometimes as a bribe, you know? So it really depends on what you mean by incentivizing, if I'm being honest. With enforcing, once again, what does that mean? So enforcing, just I'm thinking of, like, you know, politics in a high term level here. With enforcing, you could really have a heavy-handed variation of enforcing. You know, look at how some countries enforces laws with citizens. It really depends on the person in power and which method of I guess enforcing the law, or their style of diplomacy or politics. So they feel that heavy-handed enforcing is better versus incentivizing. It really depends. To Manuel's point about education as a way to solve problems, I firmly believe that. You know, I've said that several times throughout the talk. I agree with you that we shouldn't rely on the government to do everything. The government, you can't rely solely on the government to do everything. And what it really takes at times is for people to feel empowered, to take up action, or to encourage others to take up action. And I was writing down some points as, you know, Manuel was talking, and I came up with this point here for myself. And I thought about brain drain, which is interesting. And, you know, brain drain, you know, I'm assuming that most of you know what that is, but for those of you who don't know, so brain drain in the context of developing countries is when you have young talent, say, go abroad to school, like myself, right? You go abroad to school, and you get educated or develop all these networks and connections and whatever in the country you go abroad to, like the UK, US, wherever. And instead of going back to your country, you're in that country. And so a lot of developing countries have lost talented young people from the brain drain thing. And when it comes to education, going back to Mal's point, when you're talking about education and the government not doing everything and people taking care of people within the community taking care of itself, I mean, self-resilient, I think another long-term issue that some of these countries have to look at is brain drain. How do you address the brain drain issue? How do you attract talented individuals who are from that country, who go overseas and develop a whole bunch of intelligence, connections, networks, whatever it is? How do you attract them to come back to their country, back to their home countries? Because with those people, if you could find a way to attract them to come back to their home countries, just imagine the good that they could do there. You know, just imagine in their local communities, say in Dominican Republic, how they can inspire people or get into decision-making or get into positions of power where they make decisions and can have a very forward-thinking agenda. You know, maybe that could be a way to address the corruption issue as well. You know, you need forward-thinking, bright, and people with integrity who are smart, who actually care about specific communities. And how do you address the brain drain issue? And I know it wasn't brought up, but it's just something I thought about as we were having these discussions. So
thank you. Thank you very much, Jonathan, for all the time you have dedicated us today. This has been, I believe, a productive consultation, a productive meeting. And I want to thank the people from the entire United States and Latin America and the Caribbean for joining us, especially to IEDRI, which is la Asociación Dominicana de Estudiantes de Relaciones Internacionales, the Dominican Students of International Relations Association. And I would like now to hand over the floor to Ms. Margot Lazaro. She's the president and chair of the NGO, the Committee on Sustainable Development in New York, and the co-founder of the SDG Impact Awards, two of our co-sponsors today, and to Rory Muncy. You already know her. She is the Director of Civic Engagement and Strategic Diplomacy at IAPSS. So Miss Lázaro and Rory, the floor is yours.
Hi, Rory, do you want to go first?
Oh, that's okay. You should definitely go first.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you everyone for inviting me to be a part of your session today. Came in a little bit late, but I did hear a lot. And, you know, I think I've been involved with the UN for quite a while, as well as being involved in film, theater, and TV. And there's a lot of synergy in terms of getting things done when you're involved with film and TV. You know, if there's a problem, solve it. And for me, I've been involved with sustainable development issues, nuclear disarmament, peace. I mean, just across the spectrum, equality, women's and youth empowerment. One of the things that I do want to say though is that it's really important for all of you to consider working in an intergenerational way. If I might give you some, suggestions right now, because if you want to be included, then you also need to include others as well. You know, let them give you some support. You know, some of the youth that were there during the signing of the Sustainable Development Goals in 2015, it was over a weekend. We were all there with the member states that were going to vote. And some of those youth have gone on into government roles. Lloyd, for instance, is now part of the parliament in the UK. And we all worked together. I mean, we were all working hand in hand. And so please remember to always work in an intergenerational manner. Ask your questions, but always ask, how can I help and support you? And you'll see doors open that you might not have seen open before, but meet it. And it shouldn't just be to promote yourself, but to also to learn and to be more engaged and supportive. Again, intergenerational is critically important. And also including all stakeholders. And Indigenous should be at the table, women, there should be more women, I think, here in this session now, a little bit more gender balanced. But you do what you can, and everything you do counts. So this NGO Committee on Sustainable Development New York has been around for a long time also, and I started leading it, I would say a few years ago. But we also wanted to act in it. I wanted our civil society partners to really be engaged in a more business-like way, and how we showed up, and we wanted to engage ambassadors, UN agencies, private sector, youth, academia, across the board, everybody, because SDG 17 is about partnership, and that's how we wanted to show up. And to that end, we created the SDG Impact Awards, evolved out of that passion to do that with one of my colleagues, Samantha Surimata UN. He's the chair of that. And so we developed the awards. And over the pandemic, this is now evolved into a community. So this is not about a competition. This is about including everybody with their positive solutions for change. And I just want to share with you quickly that we have a slogan with the NGO Committee on Sustainable Development, and that is turn your passions into actions for change. So if you're passionate about what you're looking to do, with any of these topics, especially around climate, you should always be passionate and let your passion show, and the passion will lead to success. In fact, I know Al Gore from 1992 when he wanted to come to something I was doing with youth, and then he repeated it at the Earth Summit in Rio in 92. We did it again with him, and we were at UNICEF in New York in March of that year. That we did it again in Rio in June. So, that was pretty amazing what we did in Rio then, and introducing him to some pretty amazing people that I knew that he has to be introduced to besides working with the youth. But we also, in July of this year, just last month, Rory and I took the first virtual training that Climate Reality Project did, which is his, Al Gore's, and they had 10,000 people there. And what was great, they had some they were what speed networking sessions, and we got to meet people in a very quick time, people from South America, Asia, you name it, everywhere. I even met a fellow that I met at the UN last year from Philadelphia. I saw he came into one of the rooms and says, I've been trying to find you. So take your passion and let it guide you. And, you know, maybe pick some things that you really want to focus on essentially right away. And nuclear disarmament is an interesting one in itself because I was representing Mayors for Peace for 5 years at the UN. And you know, Japan is fond of nuclear energy. And, you know, Fukushima, what happened to the plant? So there's a lot of issues here. And we all need to stay focused and stay positive and keep going, even through the pandemic. Thank you for all that you're doing. I'm inspired by what I just heard just now. Try to include more women. I just want to mention that. Thank you. Thank you for having me join you. Rory, over to you.
I think Rory is having a few technical issues. She's rejoining. She's restarting her Zoom. But I would like quickly thank you, Ms. Lazaro, for co-sponsoring this event with us and for your words and for all your advice.
Oh, I just want to say one thing. I'm going to ask that you, I'm sorry, I apologize. I don't think I said this. Please go to the SDG Impact Awards.org and submit any solutions that you have that you think that you're working on or that you know people who are working on, and submit them. We welcome you and join the community. It's growing and we really appreciate that. We also have invited in people who are private sector who are looking to invest in solutions, so you might actually find support for your initiatives. Thank you. Sorry, I forgot that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's okay. The link for the SDG Impacts Award page, it's here in the comments section. Rory sent it, so please go to the SDG Impacts Award and list the solutions on where you're working right now to address climate change.
Thank you.
Wait a few minutes.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Rory. Rory's back.
Yes. For some reason, the Zoom just did not load, and the video will not load either.
Well, you're back, Dirk.
What?
You're back. That's great.
Yeah, back and ready to go. All right, so I'm just going to give some closing remarks. My name is Rory Munshine. I'm the Director of Civic Engagement and Strategic Diplomacy at the International Association for Political Science Students, and I'm also a Communications Associate for UN2020, so I'm sort of here in two capacities. And it's honestly my pleasure to deliver the closing remarks for this UN75 consultation. For the past few weeks, we've been working with our IAPSS regions to facilitate these dialogues because it's important for young people to get involved. And it's important for every generation to get involved. It's something that Margot was definitely mentioning throughout the call, and through just something that everybody was mentioning really was that it's important to facilitate partnerships to move forward. Climate change is definitely something that transcends national borders and requires a large scale focus. It's not something that you can just ignore. It's not something that can easily be brushed to the side and that some countries can opt in and out of. It requires strength in multilateralism. It requires an intergenerational commitment to addressing these issues. And it requires us to really work together across sectors to come up with solutions. I want to thank Jonathan Cummings, who has all these different experience in these different sectors, who was able to speak to all of those different interests and highlight ways that we could really market it. Now, IAPSS is going to continue to undertake these consultations for the next few weeks because it really is important for us to make sure that our voices are heard. And one way that you can do that is to definitely engage in the UN75 online survey. Marcos has posted a link down below, and we're going to post that link on our Facebook page. And another way to get involved is to endorse the UN2020's UN75 People's Declaration. And if you don't know what that is, it is a declaration that really outlines some ways that we can build back better. The UN 75th anniversary is not just the UN 75th birthday, but it is really a chance for us to come together and think about the UN that we need to address some of these different global challenges. Now, Justin, if you could please share a video to provide more information about the UN 2020's UN 75 People's Declaration, we would greatly appreciate that. And definitely follow along with us as we get more into these consultations and host more of them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Rory. So we'll just gonna share my screen here and okay. Okay, it looks like the host here is Marcos has got it. Okay.
Marcos, if you could put the sound on. Justin?
Maybe they should restart it.
Justin, the video requires sound. If you could please restart it.
Sorry?
You need to restart it, needs sound.
The video needs sound.
Please restart it from the beginning. Still not on. There's no sound, guys.
Yeah, just give us a second here. Marcos, I believe your the video's on your computer there.
Does it sound better now?
No sound. You need to put the sound on.
Oh,
Start it over.
let's see, I think I have- What about now?
Nothing. You need to start from the beginning.
Are you able to hear the video?
No.
I don't know, maybe
Perhaps we
Josh?
can, perhaps
can
we
help
can
me.
just share this just in the chat, perhaps, and people can just perhaps view it.
Sure. So I just shared the link to the video. It's a 3-minute video you can access really quick to it. I would like to thank everyone again for joining us in this regional consultation of Latin America and the Caribbean. I'd like to thank our speaker, Jonathan Cummings, for joining us today. Thanks our sponsors and Margot Lázaro, who's the representative of the the Committee for Sustainable Development New York and the SDG Impacts Award. please go to the SDG Impacts Award webpage and fill their solutions we're working on, and fill out the UN75 survey. All the links are here in the group chat. So those of you who, yes?
Thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure, and definitely keep in touch with us as we continue these UN75 consultations. Link to join IAPSS is down below, and we will share that also to our Facebook viewers. Thank you guys so much. See you soon.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.